Today, we're embarking on a deep dive into a topic that, well, it usually throws off sparks the second you mention it, the economics of illegal drugs. But we are going to, perform an act of deliberate focus. We aren't here for the heated ideological battles, the questions of morality, or any of the debates around criminal justice reform.
No, we're here for the dollars and cents, or in this case, the pounds and pence.
Exactly.
Our mission is really pure economics. We're analyzing the surprisingly stark relationship between the retail value of the illegal drug market and the absolute total public cost of dealing with its consequences.
So we're asking the dullest, but maybe the most important question.
What is this system actually costing us? That's it.
Okay, but before we jump into the numbers, a really critical housekeeping note for you, the listener.
Yeah, this is important.
The data we've consolidated for this deep dive comes almost entirely from government commissioned analyses, and they're focused specifically on England and Wales.
Right, and that gives us the clearest, most consistent picture for this kind of analysis.
Which means you can't just, multiply these figures by 1.2 and apply them to the whole UK.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Policy, market structure, and the harms in Scotland and Northern Ireland are often quite different. We are looking at a system in isolation to understand its dynamics.
It's all about understanding that dynamic relationship.
Precisely.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Let's start at the source of the problem, the market itself. What is the scale of the money flowing into the hands of criminals?
Okay.
And let's forget the sensational media headlines or, hypothetical street values. We're talking about actual retail spending by users.
The cash handed over.
In England and Wales, what's the number?
Mainstream estimates put the total retail value of the illegal drugs market at roughly 9 to 10 billion pounds per year.
9 to 10 billion. That is a massive, untaxed cash injection into the criminal economy.
It is. Now, set that figure against the damage. Government analyses conducted across multiple departments, Home Office, Health, Justice, they consistently estimate the total social and economic cost
Of illegal drugs in England and Wales.
at a colossal 20 billion pounds per year.
Wait, I have to stop you there. 20 billion.
20 billion.
So 9 billion going in and 20 billion coming out in public costs. We are spending more than double the entire retail value of the market just cleaning up the mess it creates.
That's it. That is a stunning fiscal failure.
It's an economic imbalance, and it's the core finding of this entire analysis.
It is. The public is incurring a cost roughly twice the size of the market itself. And remember, that 20 billion pound cost, it hits us before a single penny is recouped in taxes.
And while the entire, 10 billion is funneled directly into organized crime?
It's an unsustainable structure. It just doesn't add up.
But those figures are so huge, we have to break them down.
We do.
When people hear social and economic cost, they often think, what, police or hospital bills?
Just the obvious stuff.
What exactly is rolled into that 20 billion? Let's dedicate some time to the anatomy of this massive figure.
Absolutely. The 20 billion is synthesized from several key components. So the most obvious and what people most often focus on are the specific financial costs to the public sector.
Okay.
Inside that 20 billion, we spend around 1 to 2 billion pounds annually on enforcement alone.
1 to 2 billion. Just on enforcement.
That's policing, border control, and specific judicial costs tied to drug seizure and arrest.
So 1 to 2 billion just to try and stop the flow? That's an enormous administrative undertaking.
It is. And that is before we even factor in the costs of the criminal justice system beyond, the initial arrest.
So there's more.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking about billions more associated with drug-related crime, the cost of courts, probation services, and crucially, the maintenance of the prison estate. That's a huge one.
Right, because when you put a person in jail, that is a direct, quantifiable public expenditure that stems from this illegal market.
Exactly.
And then we get into the less visible costs, but maybe the more profound ones. What about health and the wider economy?
That's where the numbers really inflate. The 20 billion calculation includes vast sums for health harms and treatment.
So that's everything from A&E visits.
Emergency room visits for overdoses, long-term care for addiction, bloodborne virus management, mental health services strain, all of it. But the biggest single element of the economic cost is usually lost productivity.
Lost productivity. That sounds a bit academic. What does it mean in real terms for you listening?
It's the monetization of opportunity cost. It measures the economic output lost because people are unable to participate fully in the economy.
So things like absenteeism.
Absenteeism, reduced work performance, unemployment resulting from dependency, and crucially, the lost lifetime earnings of those who are incarcerated or who die prematurely due to drug-related harms.
So it's a measure of the lost human capital of the nation.
That's a good way to put it. It's the biggest and often the most shocking component because it quantifies the impact of dependency on the broader economic engine.
So we've got public services stretched, police budgets drained, and a serious drag on the national economy.
All stemming from this one market.
And you mentioned the profound impacts on families and communities. I mean, how do researchers even monetize something that sounds so qualitative?
Well, they attempt to quantify it through factors like child protection services involvement, the housing pressures caused by instability linked to drug use, and the specific pressures placed on local government services.
I see.
While these costs are challenging to quantify precisely, they represent the wider public service pressures. This whole $20 billion is a colossal measure of societal dysfunction driven by the market structure itself.
The common reaction here is usually, well, if we just dedicated more resources,
Just push harder.
maybe 3 or 4 billion on enforcement, surely we could drive that 9 billion market down and the 20 billion cost would eventually disappear. It assumes we can enforce the behavior to zero.
And history suggests we need to challenge that assumption fiercely.
How so?
We've been trying to enforce drug use to zero for decades, and the persistent numbers tell a very different story. You can even look back at UK history. Before 1969, we operated under a system where legally registered addicts existed.
Right.
They could sometimes receive drugs at no or low cost from clinicians. Now, the scale was small, but that system demonstrates that policy has historically managed a baseline level of drug use rather than eliminating it.
So that historical snapshot proves that a baseline demand is a structural reality. It's not just some temporary anomaly to be policed away.
Exactly, and the modern data supports that persistence, even after decades of prohibition and aggressive enforcement.
Okay, so what does that look like now?
If we look at current population statistics for England and Wales, we see the scale of that baseline demand. Around a third of all adults report having used an illegal drug at least once in their lifetime.
A third. That's a staggering level of lifetime exposure in the population.
It is, and in any given year, around 1 in 10 adults report recent use.
1 in 10.
But here is the crucial distinction that often gets missed, and it's where the 20 billion cost analysis gets really interesting.
Okay.
The vast majority of those 1 in 10 adults do not become dependent. They do not create serious public health or crime burdens.
So if 1 in 10 adults use drugs recently, but they aren't the primary driver of the cost, where is that 20 billion originating?
It is concentrated. The vast majority of the harm, the high costs in health, crime, and lost productivity are generated by a very small group.
Who are they?
This is the group experiencing serious or dependent drug use, typically estimated at only 2 to 3% of the overall population.
Here's where it gets really interesting. If we know that, 97% of the population who may have used a drug recently are not contributing significantly to the social cost.
Right.
But we are designing the entire system, including all the enforcement and criminal elements, around driving the baseline use of the entire market to zero.
The outcome is that 20 billion fiscal failure, precisely. We are building policy around a hypothetical ideal zero demand rather than the persistent reality of 2 to 3% dependency.
Any consequence of that?
The consequence is that we spend twice the market value of the product dealing with the fallout while inadvertently guaranteeing a £10 billion profit stream for criminal organizations who are more than happy to manage the risk of supplying that persistent demand.
So the system is essentially economically self-sabotaging because it refuses to accept the data showing persistent demand exists.
That's it. It's structurally compromised. And to confirm this, let's take a quick detour and apply a sense check using a different market.
Okay, where are we going?
A market where the health consequences are similar, but the structure is completely different. Tobacco.
Tobacco is a perfect comparator.
It is.
It illustrates how regulation handles long-term persistent behavior. I mean, lifetime exposure to tobacco is high. We're talking around 55 to 60% of UK adults having smoked at some point, even though current smoking rates are down significantly, around 12 to 13% now.
Exactly. And when we look at the cost of tobacco, the estimated total social cost of smoking in the UK is about £25 billion per year.
25 billion. So a number similar in magnitude to the illegal drug cost.
It is.
Yeah.
Now, you're asking, why is this acceptable, or at least manageable, in a way the drug cost is not?
And the answer is?
Regulation and taxation.
The mechanism is everything.
Because smoking is legal and regulated, the state can measure the scale of use, fund treatment directly through dedicated revenue streams, and crucially collect massive amounts of tax. Annual tobacco duty revenue is around £8 billion plus per year. You care why?
So that revenue doesn't eliminate the £25 billion cost of long-term health harms,
No, of course not. Those often take decades to emerge.
but it dramatically changes the economic balance.
It does.
So, in the tobacco scenario, we are still spending a massive amount on health costs. But the market itself is funding a substantial portion of the cleanup, and the supply chain is regulated, which minimizes collateral crime.
Right.
In the illegal drug scenario, we have the equivalent cost, $20 billion, but the market contributes zero revenue and generates $10 billion for criminals instead.
That is the fundamental difference in the economic structure. It's the difference between a high-cost system that funds its own consequences through taxation and a high-cost system that actively funds its own opposition, the criminal market.
Now, we can't talk about these costs in a vacuum. A significant complicating factor, which perhaps explains why the total cost feels so astronomical, is the massive overlap between users.
That's right. When researchers calculate these costs, they see the same people showing up in different administrative systems. Drug users, tobacco users, and alcohol users are not three clean, distinct populations.
There's huge overlap.
Enormous overlap. Alcohol lifetime use, for instance, approaches 90% of adults.
So I see the problem. If we calculate a $20 billion drug cost, a $25 billion tobacco cost, and, large costs for alcohol, we run the risk of double counting the strain on shared public services.
Like the local mental health unit or the court system.
Exactly.
Precisely. But here is why that overlap doesn't weaken the argument. It actually strengthens it against the current prohibition model.
How so?
The fact that the same vulnerable people are driving these costs exposes the core policy weakness. We design and fund our responses in silos.
So we have a drug strategy, an alcohol strategy, a tobacco strategy.
All with separate budgets and enforcement streams, even though the problems are converging on the same 2 to 3% of vulnerable individuals and hitting the same community service providers.
Meaning, we are likely paying multiple times over to manage the same set of underlying vulnerabilities.
That's it. This structural separation is inherently inefficient, and it ensures that all those billions are spent inefficiently. We're paying for a fragmented response to a unified societal vulnerability.
Let's zoom back out and focus one last time on the illegal market in England and Wales. The picture is clear. Roughly 9 to 10 billion pounds spent buying illegal drugs.
And we're paying roughly 20 billion pounds dealing with the immediate consequences.
It's a cost-benefit catastrophe built on the premise that demand can be eliminated.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, the core question we have to grapple with is this. If we accept the persistent baseline reality of drug use, and we are already spending twice the market's value cleaning up the resulting mess, what exactly is that 20 billion paying for?
It's not paying for success.
It's paying for the immense persistent cost of maintaining a system that structurally refuses to acknowledge the reality of demand.
And in doing so, empowering the criminal market to continue driving the costs.
Exactly.
Accepting that baseline reality, as politically or socially uncomfortable as that might be, it forces the discussion away from morality and toward policy efficiency.
It has to.
It opens up different questions. If we stop trying to drive demand to zero through enforcement, how can we leverage the money already flowing in the market, the 9 to 10 billion, to offset that 20 billion cost rather than letting it fund organized crime?
The bottom line is that the public cost substantially exceeds the market's retail value. The focus must shift immediately from the futile goal of eliminating behavior to the crucial task of optimizing the design of the system itself.
So what knowledge about cost and demand persistence should be the absolute first input into any new policy discussion?
It's the knowledge that we are already paying the price. We are already incurring the costs of health, lost productivity, crime management. The question is not how much the market costs. The question is, why are we handing the profits to criminals when those profits could be funding the treatment and cleanup we are already paying for? That's the hard economic choice.
A compelling and frankly startling fiscal reality. Thank you for helping us unpack this enormous but essential analysis.
It's been a pleasure.
And for you, the listener, here is a final provocative thought to mull over. If we could monetize the entire illegal drug market, where would you prioritize spending the first £1 billion in tax revenue? Would it go to enforcement to catch up, or to long-term health and dependency services to manage the underlying cause of the £20 billion cost? Something to think about as you go about your day. We'll see you next time for the next deep dive.